It takes unselfish people to grow a congregation. What I mean by that is they must be willing to give up some of the benefits that they have of a small congregation in order for the purpose of ministering to more people. And that takes a quite maturity. See, there's this constant tension in your synagogue or your church between what I call service and serve us. Service or serve us. And you have to decide, does the congregation exist for service or does it exist to serve us? That is the hard point, okay? And if it just exists to serve us, then basically what you end up being is you're the hired holy man, okay? And you're the hired holy man. You're the personal chaplain for a few people, okay? And it's interesting that once did a study of this in Christianity. They surveyed 1,000 churches in America, and they said, what is the purpose of the church? And they asked the members of 1,000 congregations. And in the churches, 87% of the members said, the purpose of the church is to serve us, the members. And about 12% said the purpose of the church is to reach out and minister to the world. Okay. They then went and asked the pastors of the same congregation, what is the purpose of the church? And it was the exact opposite. 90% of the pastors said the purpose of the church is to be an influence in the community, to serve humanity, and we're blessed to be a blessing. Okay? We're blessed to be a blessing. Okay? And 10% said the purpose is to take care of the members. Well, if you can't get the leadership and the members to even agree on the purpose, you got a problem. The bottom line is this. If your congregation is going to grow, you must be willing to have people who do not come to you to have their spiritual needs met. Because the average man or woman can handle about 150 people. That's it. And actually, how I learned this the hard way. When Saddleback started growing, we grew from just my wife and I. When we had about 400 to 500 people, I was still trying to do it all. All the teaching, all the praying, all the visiting, all the hospital visitation, all the counseling, baptizing, all of the different, I was trying to do all of the whole thing, and I was burning out. And so finally one night, I got up on a Wednesday night at a special meeting in our church, and I said, folks, I can't do this anymore. I am burning out. I cannot personally meet all of your needs. But as I see it, I'm not supposed to. And I went back to that Exodus 18 passage where Jethro comes and says, you got to divide it up. You're going to die. You're going to burn out if you do it all. Moses, you got to get leaders of 100 and leaders of 1,000 and leaders of 50 and leaders of 10s. And I said, we're going to do this the biblical way. And we're going to, you cannot all come to me anymore. And I said, I'll make you a deal. I believe that every person is to be involved in ministry. Every person is to be involved in service. If you will do your service and use your talents and gifts, I will make sure you're well fed. I will focus on teaching and leading, feeding and leading, and you do the ministry. And the people said, you got a deal, Rick. We shook hands on it, signed a little covenant together, and right after that, Saddleback exploded with growth because I wasn't the bottleneck anymore. I was literally holding the church back by me trying to do it all. And what happened was, this is kind of funny because about a year later, this is 20 years ago, I heard about a guy in our church who had a heart attack. And I had already stopped making hospital visits because how could I be fair? Who am I going to go visit? Walt was a charter member. I guess I'll go see Walt. So I go over to Saddleback Hospital and I walk into the head nurse at intensive care and I walk up to her and I said, hi, my name's Pastor Rick. I'm here to see Walt. And she looks up at me and says, how many pastors does this church have? I started laughing. I said, well, if you're like talking about full-time paid, I think we got 7 or 8. I said, if you're talking about lay ministers, I said, we got a whole church full of them. We got hundreds of them. She goes, well, I'm sorry, you can't see him. Too many pastors have already seen him. And I think this is funny. She wouldn't let me in. So I'm laughing, and I said, ma'am, you don't understand. I'm the pastor. You're like the founding pastor, the head honcho, the big wapabonga. She goes, I don't care who you are. You can't see him. And I think this is really funny. She won't let me in. So she walks away, and I snuck in anyway. It's always easier to get forgiveness than permission, right? So I walk in and go into the room. He's got IVs in his arms, Walt. He's got this mask on his head. He sits up in bed and goes, Pastor Rick, what are you doing here? Like, I must be really sick. The big guy's here. You know, it's like, wow, I'm really, the big guy is here. And I got a friend who's a pastor of a church in Houston, and he said, a little lady said, Pastor John, when are you going to come visit me? And he said, ma'am, you don't want to be that ill. So, you know, what I did is I talked to him for a while. I read a little scripture to him. I prayed, you know, sprinkled pixie dust around the bread. Here a prayer, there a prayer, everywhere a prayer, and sailed off into the sunset. And he goes, who was that masked man, you know? And I didn't even get a chance to thank him. You know, but I walked out of that room, and I thought, and tears started coming down my eyes, because I thought, he didn't need to see me. Because in the previous 24 hours, 5 lay ministers of our church had gone to see him. Okay? Normal, ordinary, just members had gone, and that's the power of a small group. When you divide people into small groups, then that group takes care of the needs. And when they're in the hospital, the small group takes care of it. And when they're sick, the small group brings meals. When they need a babysitter, the small group provides babysitters. So they're not always looking to the professional to meet the spiritual needs. And that's the only way I've been able to maintain my sanity. But I do miss it.